My husband's family, the Fontaines, are this kind of family. And at the absolute center of the Fontaine universe, dictating the orbit of every single person around her, is my mother-in-law, Vivienne. Vivienne Fontaine is 64 years old. She is a size 4. She wears structured, neutral-toned linen in the brutal Louisiana summer. She never sweats, she never raises her voice, and she possesses the chilling ability to dissect a person's entire physical existence with a single, lingering glance. I am 32, I am a size 24. I run a highly successful boutique catering company that services the wealthiest, most demanding clients in the Garden District. I understand food, I understand logistics, and I understand how to manage chaos. I am entirely comfortable taking up space, both physically and professionally. But taking up space in Vivienne Fontaine's world is the ultimate, unforgivable sin. For the first 5 years of my marriage to her son, Christophe, my body was treated not as a part of the family, but as a persistent, unfortunate logistical problem that Vivienne had to solve. If we attended a society gala, Vivienne would meticulously arrange the seating so I was placed at the absolute end of the table, half hidden by massive floral centerpieces. If there was a family photograph in the courtyard, she would cheerfully direct me to stand behind Christophe, positioning him so his broad shoulders obscured 80% of my frame. She never said the word fat. She never explicitly insulted my weight. Instead, she used the weaponized language of aesthetics. "Dominique, darling," she would coo, adjusting my placement with cool fingers. "If you stand right there, it just makes the composition so much cleaner. The lines are just a bit heavy otherwise." Cleaner. That was the word she used, like my body was a stain on the pristine fabric of her family's public image. Christophe, my husband, is a wonderful, deeply loving man. But he is a Fontaine. He was raised to believe that his mother's obsession with aesthetics was simply a harmless eccentricity, not a calculated cruelty. When I pointed out her behavior, he would sigh, kiss my forehead, and say, "Dom, she's just neurotic about pictures. She does it to everyone. Please don't let it bother you." So I didn't. I focused on my business. I fed people beautifully. I let Vivienne have her perfectly curated, heavily edited illusions. But an illusion can only stretch so far before someone violently rips the curtain back. My curtain was ripped back in the sun-drenched lobby of a luxury resort in St. Lucia. The trip was conceived 6 months in advance to celebrate my father-in-law Gerard's 70th birthday. Gerard is the opposite of his wife. He is a warm, booming, deeply genuine man who loves good bourbon and loud laughter. He adored me. He loved the food I cooked, and he constantly bragged to his friends about my catering business. He was the one who initially organized the birthday trip. The plan was grand. The entire immediate Fontaine family, Gerard, Vivienne, their 3 adult children, and their spouses, would travel to a hyper-exclusive resort in St. Lucia for 9 days. We would be staying in a massive, private 5-bedroom luxury villa on the property. Because Gerard believed in everyone contributing, he calculated the per-person cost for the villa and the resort fees. It came to exactly $2,400 a head. In February, 4 months before the trip, I logged into my banking app and personally wired $2,400 directly to Gerard's account. Christophe wired his $2,400 separately from his business account. A few weeks after I sent the money, Christophe's younger brother and his wife unexpectedly had to drop out of the trip due to a high-risk pregnancy. This required the booking to be slightly restructured. Gerard, who was busy with a corporate merger, handed the logistical duties over to Vivienne. "Mother is handling the rebooking," Christophe told me casually one evening over dinner. "She's dealing with the resort directly." I thought nothing of it. I was buried in the busy spring wedding season for my catering company. I bought 4 new novels to read on the beach. I bought a stunning, vibrant tropical swimsuit. I packed my bags. In June, we flew to St. Lucia. The flight was long but pleasant. We took a private car from the airport to the resort. The property was breathtaking. Lush green mountains diving straight into crystal-clear turquoise water. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. The Fontaine family, all 7 of us now, spilled into the massive open-air marble lobby. We were greeted with chilled, lemongrass-scented towels and glasses of champagne. Gerard went to the primary check-in desk to get the keys for the 5-bedroom villa. I stood a few feet back, holding my champagne glass, smiling as I felt the warm Caribbean breeze on my face. Vivienne stood to my left, perfectly composed, inspecting her manicured nails. Mr. Fontaine, the front desk agent, a beautifully dressed woman named Seraphine, smiled warmly as she typed on her keyboard. "Welcome to St. Lucia. We have your massive oceanfront villa ready. Let me just confirm the guest manifest before I hand over the keycards. Of course, Gerard beamed. Seraphine read off the screen. Gerard Fontaine, Vivienne Fontaine, Christophe Fontaine, Amélie Fontaine, Thomas Dubois. She stopped. She looked up. And that completes the manifest for the villa. 5 guests. I froze. My champagne glass suddenly felt very cold in my hand. I stepped forward. I'm sorry, I said, keeping my voice polite and even. There should be a 6th. Dominique Fontaine. I'm Christophe's wife. Seraphine frowned slightly and clicked her mouse a few times. She stared intently at the screen. I apologize, Mrs. Fontaine, Seraphine said softly, her eyes full of genuine professional regret. But your name is not on the reservation. The booking was officially modified 3 months ago to specifically remove you from the villa manifest. The entire lobby went dead silent. Christophe turned around, his face pale. Gerard looked bewildered. And then, I looked at Vivienne. She was standing right next to me. She was not looking at the front desk agent. She was not looking at her son, or her husband, or me. She was looking intently, deliberately, at the zipper on her carry-on bag. In that single, agonizing second, the entire truth crystallized perfectly in my mind. What do you mean her name isn't on the reservation? Christophe demanded, stepping toward the desk, his voice rising in panic. She's my wife. She paid her portion months ago. There must be a mistake. I'm so sorry, sir, Seraphine said gently, turning her screen slightly so Christophe could see it. But the modification was initiated from Mrs. Vivienne Fontaine's email account. The guest list was explicitly finalized for 5 people, and because the villa requires a strict per-person occupancy fee and registration for resort access, I cannot issue a keycard or a wristband for Mrs. Dominique Fontaine. Gerard turned to his wife, completely stunned. Vivienne, what is this? Did you accidentally drop Dominique's name when you reorganized the booking? Vivienne finally looked up from her bag. Her face was a masterclass in composed innocence. Oh, goodness, she murmured, touching her throat lightly. I suppose I must have. When David and Sarah canceled, the paperwork was just so terribly confusing. The resort sent so many forms. It must have been a clerical error. I'm so sorry, Dominique. It was a lie. A clean, polished, utterly sociopathic lie. She had not forgotten. She had not made an error. She had looked at a 5-bedroom luxury villa and calculated exactly how many thin, perfectly proportioned bodies she needed to fill it for the resort photographer she had hired. And she had purposefully surgically removed the size 24 woman from the frame. She stood there, in the lobby of a foreign country, and watched a hotel employee tell me I had no place to sleep. I looked at her. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The absolute, undeniable cruelty of what she had done stripped every ounce of emotion out of me, leaving behind a profound, terrifying clarity. It's fine, I said. My voice was incredibly calm. Christophe looked at me horrified. Dom, it's not fine. Where are you going to sleep? I said, it's fine. I turned away from the primary check-in desk and walked exactly 15 feet to the right, approaching the premium concierge counter. A sharply dressed young man stood at attention. Good afternoon, I said smoothly, smiling at him. My name is Dominique Fontaine. I'd like to book a room. For 1 person. For 9 nights. The young man blinked, quickly tapping his keyboard. Of course, ma'am. Let me see what we have available for immediate check-in. I don't want just a room, I continued, pulling my sleek black premium corporate credit card from my wallet and placing it firmly on the marble counter. I want the best single occupancy suite you have currently available. Oceanfront. He typed rapidly. Ma'am, we do have one of our private standalone cliffside plunge pool suites available. It features a private terrace, a 4-poster king bed, and direct, unobstructed ocean views. However, booking it day of is quite expensive. I'll take it, I said, tapping the black card. Charge it in full. The transaction took less than 3 minutes. I took my new shiny black keycard. I walked back over to my husband and his family. They were all standing in exactly the same spot, frozen in an awkward, horrifying tableau. Christophe, I said calmly, please hand me my suitcase. He looked sick. His eyes were wide, darting between me and his mother. Dom, please let me fix this. Let me figure out how to add you to the villa. No, I said softly, taking the handle of my suitcase from his hand. Your mother reorganized the booking. The booking is finalized. I have my own suite now. He lowered his voice, speaking just to me. She said she accidentally left you off. Accidentally, I repeated, my tone utterly flat. That's what she said. Christoph, she helped your father reorganize the booking. She removed my name, and she stood right there, at the check-in counter, and watched the agent tell me I wasn't allowed in the villa, and she stared at her carry-on bag. He didn't answer. He had no answer. He knew his mother. He finally saw the scalpel. I turned and walked away, following the bellboy to my private suite. I checked into my room. It must be said, absolutely extraordinary. It was perched high on the cliffside, far away from the massive family villas. The massive king bed was draped in crisp white linen. The private plunge pool infinity edge dropped off directly into the horizon of the Caribbean Sea. I unpacked my bags. I changed into my new vibrant tropical swimsuit. I put on sunscreen and I went down to the beach. The resort photographer whom Vivian had pre-booked months in advance to capture the family's first afternoon was there on the sand. But I was not with the family. I was alone. The photographer saw me. He did not see a logistical problem. He did not see an aesthetic error. He saw a beautiful, confident woman in a striking swimsuit. He photographed me swimming. He photographed me sitting at the beach bar, sipping a rum cocktail. He photographed me reading my novel under the shade of a massive palm tree. At one point, he knelt down low on the wet sand and captured me floating on my back in the crystal-clear shallows. My eyes were closed, my face was turned toward the brilliant sky, and the luminous, glowing water rippled smoothly all around my curves. That photograph, which the resort emailed to me at the end of the week, is currently the lock screen on my phone. I am in it entirely, every single bit of me. Nothing is cropped out. Nothing is hidden behind a broad shoulder. Nothing is banished to the edge of the frame. I want to describe the next 9 days briefly, because they matter deeply to the psychology of what happened next. I did not let Vivienne Fontaine ruin my vacation. I took the vacation I had paid for. I swam every single morning in my private pool. I ate every single meal at the exact time, and in the exact quantity that I wanted. On Wednesday, I went on a private snorkeling excursion that nearly made me weep from how stunning the coral reef was. I laid on my private terrace and read all 4 of my novels completely, from cover to cover. I booked a deep tissue massage at the spa on Tuesday afternoon. It was so spectacularly good that I booked another one for Friday. The Fontaine family existed completely parallel to me. Christophe spent his mornings with me in my suite, apologizing endlessly, looking utterly miserable. He spent his afternoons with his siblings at the villa. I attended most of the large family dinners, sitting at the massive resort restaurants in my beautiful evening gowns. Vivienne was perfectly, terrifyingly cordial in the careful, practiced way of a predator who is waiting for its prey to either submit or run away. Gerard was warm and boisterous, completely oblivious to the freezing tension, enjoying his bourbon and his family. But the cracks were showing. On day 3, Christophe's older sister, Amélie, found me lying on a cabana bed near the adult pool. She sat down next to me, took off her sunglasses, and stared out at the water. "I want you to know," she said without any preamble. "I didn't know she did that. None of us did. I believe you, Amélie," I said quietly, turning a page in my book. She said she was trying to make the group resort photos cleaner for the photographer. There it was. I had known it in my bones. But hearing the words spoken out loud, confirmed by her own daughter, was something entirely different from suspecting it. "Cleaner," I repeated softly. "I told her it was completely unhinged." Amélie scoffed, looking disgusted. "I told her it was wrong. She said I was just being overly sensitive." "Thank you for telling me." She shook her head. "You should have been on that reservation from the start, Dom." "Yes, I should have." On the final night, at the massive farewell dinner arranged for Gerard's actual 70th birthday, the family gathered around a beautifully lit table on the beach. Gerard stood up, raising his glass of champagne. He made a beautiful, moving toast. He thanked everyone for being there. He said that his family was his greatest accomplishment. He teared up in that specific way of a man at 70 who is looking around at the faces he loves, calculating the immense value of what he has, without quite being ready to calculate what it actually costs to maintain it. I raised my glass. I drank the champagne. I ate my excellent, perfectly seared grouper. I smiled. And I waited. We flew back to New Orleans on a Sunday. On Tuesday afternoon, I checked Vivienne's meticulously maintained public social calendar. I knew she had her high society book club meeting from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. At 2 p.m., I drove to Gerard and Vivienne's sprawling historic estate in the Garden District. Gerard was in his home office reviewing contracts. He was delighted to see me. He offered me iced tea and we sat down at the massive rustic kitchen table. The trip was spectacular, wasn't it, Dominique? He beamed. And your private suite? I must say, you looked incredibly relaxed all week. It was a lovely trip, Gerard. I smiled gently. But I actually came over to speak to you about something specific. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone and unlocked it. I opened my banking app, navigated to my transaction history from February, and placed the phone flat on the table, sliding it across the wood toward him. The screen displayed a confirmed wire transfer. Gerard, I said, my voice quiet but incredibly firm. I wired $2,400 directly to your account in February. It was my personal contribution to the group booking for the villa. Gerard looked at the phone, then looked at me, slightly confused. Yes, of course, I remember receiving it. As you know, I continued, maintaining direct eye contact, my name was not on the final reservation, I was not allowed access to the villa, I am formally asking for that $2,400 to be returned to me. Gerard stared at the phone. The confusion slowly drained from his face, replaced by a devastating, horrifying realization of the math I had just presented to him. He had collected $2,400 from me. His wife had removed my name from the booking, which meant his wife had essentially stolen my money to subsidize the cost of a villa I wasn't allowed to enter. He was quiet for a very, very long time. Dominique, he finally said, his voice dropping to a low, tight rasp. I want to tell you. I need you to know that I did not know Vivienne had removed your name. I organized the initial booking. When David and Sarah canceled, she offered to manage the rebooking with the resort. I let her do it. I never reviewed the final guest list. I believe you, Gerard, I said honestly. I truly do. But the money went into your account. Yes, he said. He didn't argue. He didn't offer excuses. He didn't try to defend his wife. He stood up immediately, walked over to his desk, and pulled out his heavy leather checkbook. There was no negotiation. There was no delay. He wrote a check for exactly $2,400, signed his name with a heavy hand, and walked back over to the table. He handed me the check. I put it in my purse. I am going to speak to Vivienne, he said, his jaw locked tight. You don't have to do that for my sake, I told him, standing up to leave. I'm not doing it for yours, he replied, staring hard at the kitchen table. I'm doing it for mine. She is my wife. I love her deeply, but she made an error in judgment. A profound cruelty that I should never have left her in a position to make. I should have been looking. I nodded. This was the Fontaine man I actually respected. The one who was finally willing to look at something ugly directly in the light. But before I tell you about Vivienne's apology, I need to tell you about the rest of that week in St. Lucia. Because the week is the part that changed everything, not for Vivienne but for me. After Gerard confronted Vivienne in the lobby, after the refund check was written, after Marcus and I went upstairs to the cliffside plunge pool suite, a room so beautiful it made me want to weep just standing in it, something shifted inside me. Something I had been holding tight for 5 years of Fontaine family membership loosened and fell away. I was alone, not in the lonely sense, in the liberated sense. Marcus had his own room, I had mine. And mine was spectacular. A private terrace overlooking the Pitons, a plunge pool that hung off the edge of the cliff like a jewel suspended in mid-air, and a silence so complete that the only sounds were the trade winds and the distant crash of Caribbean waves against volcanic rock. I stood on that terrace on my first morning, wearing a white cotton robe, holding a cup of local Blue Mountain coffee, and I looked out at the ocean and I thought, this is what it feels like to take up space without apology. This view does not care what I weigh. This cliff does not have an aesthetic. This ocean does not require me to be smaller. I swam every day. Not in the resort's main pool, the one where Vivienne had imagined I would ruin the composition of her family photos, but in the Caribbean Sea itself. I waded in up to my chest, size 24, in a red one-piece swimsuit that I had bought specifically because it was red and specifically because Vivienne would have called it too much. The water was warm and salt-heavy, and it held me the way water always holds me, without judgment, without conditions, without requiring me to earn the right to float. On the third day, something unexpected happened. Amélie, Marcus's younger sister, 26, the quiet one in the family, the one who always seemed to be watching and calculating but never speaking, found me at the resort's beach bar. I was eating a plate of grilled mahi-mahi and reading a book about the history of Creole cuisine in Louisiana. She sat down across from me without asking and ordered a rum punch. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Go ahead." Mom tried to do the same thing to me 3 years ago before my college graduation. She didn't cancel my reservation, she just edited the guest list. She told my roommate, my best friend Danielle, that the ceremony tickets were family only and uninvited her. Because Danielle is. She paused, searching for the right word. Because Danielle didn't fit the Fontaine visual. What do you mean? Danielle uses a wheelchair, has since she was 14, spinal injury from a car accident. Amelie's jaw tightened. Mom told her the venue wasn't wheelchair accessible. It was. I checked. The venue had a ramp and an elevator and a dedicated accessible seating section. Mom just didn't want a wheelchair in the graduation photos. I set my fork down. I stared at Amelie across the table. The Caribbean sun was pouring through the thatched roof of the beach bar, and in that light I could see exactly how long she had been carrying this. "I didn't fight it," Amelie whispered. "I was 23. I was scared of her. I let Danielle stay home, and I have never forgiven myself for it." "Have you told Danielle?" "Last year," she cried. "Then she forgave me. Then she told me she had already known, she'd figured it out when she saw the venue photos online and noticed the ramp in every single picture." Amelie's voice cracked. "She knew my mother lied and she forgave me anyway." We sat there together for a long time, two women who had both been edited out of the Fontaine narrative, me for my weight, Danielle for her wheelchair, and I realized that Vivienne's aesthetic wasn't just about me, it was a system, a machine that had been running for decades, quietly removing anyone who didn't fit the frame. I was just the first person who had fought back loudly enough for the whole family to hear. That conversation with Amelie changed the trajectory of the week. We spent the remaining 4 days together, swimming, eating, exploring the island's volcanic sulfur springs, hiking the Tet Paul Nature Trail at sunrise. Amélie was funny and sharp and had opinions about everything from Caribbean literature to the proper ratio of butter in a roux. She was, I realized, exactly the kind of sister-in-law I had always wanted, hidden behind 5 years of Fontaine silence. On our last night, we sat on the terrace of my suite, the cliffside suite that Vivienne's sabotage had accidentally gifted me, and watched the sun set over the pitons. The sky was doing that Caribbean thing where it cycles through every color that exists and a few that don't, and Amelie turned to me and said, "You know what the funny thing is? Mom's room doesn't have this view." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my wine. Vivienne Fontaine came to my house on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks after we all returned from St. Lucia. She did not call ahead, she simply knocked on the front door. When I opened it, she was standing on my porch holding a paper bag from the artisan bakery down on Magazine Street. It was the good sourdough. The specific expensive loaf that she knows is my absolute favorite because I mentioned it in passing at a family dinner 2 years ago. Vivienne files everything away. The bread was an apology before the actual apology. I let her inside. We sat down at my kitchen table. The same table where I had fed her son hundreds of meals. She sat perfectly straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. And then she spoke. There was no practiced social warmth. There was no strategic softening. "What I did was incredibly wrong," she said, her voice tight but remarkably steady. I told myself a story about the resort photos. I told myself a story about the composition and the aesthetic. And I used that stupid story to justify removing you from a trip you had already paid for. I justified removing you from a family you are already a member of. That was wrong. And I am deeply sorry. I stared at her. It was, without a doubt, the most direct, honest thing Vivienne Fontaine had ever said to me in 5 years of marriage. "Thank you," I said simply. "I've been thinking about why I did it," she continued, her eyes dropping to the table for a fraction of a second before meeting mine again. I think I've been afraid that our family doesn't look the way I've always thought it should look. The way society expects it to look, and instead of dealing with my own ridiculous fear, I've been making it your problem. That is also wrong." I looked at this small, precise 64-year-old woman. A woman who had spent her entire adult life curating images, desperately composing an illusion of a family that met some impossible internal standard of correctness. Sitting in my kitchen, holding a loaf of bread, finally admitting the ugly truth. "Vivienne," I said, leaning forward slightly, "I accept your apology." But I need you to know something. Amelie told me about Danielle. The color drained from Vivian's face so quickly it was like watching a tide go out. The wheelchair, I continued. The graduation. The lie about the venue not being accessible. Vivian's hands, still folded in her lap, began to tremble. This isn't just about me, Vivian. This is a pattern. You have been editing people out of your family's story for years, anyone who doesn't fit your visual standard. My body. Danielle's wheelchair. Who else? How many people have quietly disappeared from the Fontaine frame because they didn't match the composition you had in your head? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The answer was in her face. The face of a woman who was seeing for the first time the full scope of what her obsession had cost. I have a proposition, I said. Her eyebrows lifted. What kind of proposition? The August portrait. The massive annual one you commission every year for the estate. Yes, I want to be in it, I said, my voice ringing with absolute, unbreakable authority. In the front row. No specific seating arrangements that put me at the edge of the frame. No standing me behind Christophe. No floral centerpieces blocking my body. I am in the front. And I want to choose the photographer, she thought for a moment. Then she nodded. All right. And Amelie gets to invite Danielle to the next family gathering. No excuses about accessibility. No edits. A longer pause. I watched Vivienne swallow something, pride maybe, or the last remnant of the aesthetic fortress she had been building for 40 years. Yes, she said. That's fair. The annual Fontaine family portrait in August of 2025 was taken by a brilliant photographer named Josephine. Josephine has a specific, incredible way with large group compositions. She doesn't force people into rigid, clean lines. She doesn't arrange bodies like props. She simply tells everyone to stop posing, turn toward the people they love and exist. The portrait features 12 people, 3 generations, and for the first time in Fontaine history, a wheelchair. Danielle is in the second row, next to Amelie, both of them laughing at something Josephine said. Gerard is at the center, looking proud and robust. Vivienne is standing right beside him, looking softer than she has in years. And I am in the absolute front. I am not staged, I am not hiding, I am just there. I am wearing a stunning emerald green dress, a size 24, and I am throwing my head back, laughing at something Amelie said half a second before the shutter clicked. It is, unequivocally, the absolute best Fontaine family portrait in 38 years of portraits. When the print arrived, Vivienne had it custom framed. She placed it dead center on the massive marble mantel in the main living room. The frame she chose is exactly 2 inches wider and thicker than any previous year's frame. She has never explicitly said this was because of me. I have never asked her to. Before she left my house that Thursday morning, I sliced the sourdough bread she brought. It was excellent. I buttered 2 thick slices and ate them right there at the kitchen table. Vivienne sat there and watched me eat them. And for the first time in her life, she watched me with the expression of a woman who was slowly, painfully learning that watching someone enjoy food, watching someone take up physical space, is not a problem to be solved, it is just a person. Being fed. Being full. Being whole. That's all it ever was. If this story hit you, if you've ever been erased from a guest list, edited out of a photo, or told you didn't fit someone else's aesthetic, drop a comment. Tell me your story. I read every single one. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Take up the space, all of it, especially the space someone tried to take from you.